Proposed changes to Colorado River stocking program.
Chairman Raines, fellow commissioners, for the record, Mark Warren, Chief of Fisheries. We thought you'd need a break from game and predators and talk a little bit about fish here for a little bit. We're going to show you a PowerPoint, and hopefully it'll come up on your computer screen. I'd like to introduce our staff person, Carolyn Cherry. There she is. Okay, she hasn't run off. She came to us about a year and a half ago from private aquaculture, and we're very lucky to have her. She's trying to bring our hatchery system up to date, which is not an easy thing, but we're moving ahead. And she's going to present the PowerPoint, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Yes, I'm Carolyn Cherry, staff specialist. I just want to give you a brief update of where we stand with the Lake Mead Hatchery. Basically, as a background, in 2004 and 2005, we undertook a major refurbishment project there, as well as one at Gallagher Hatchery. The Lake Mead project cost us approximately $17 million. In 2006, we began to resume production there, but we were limited to November and March, in which we could rear fish due to water temperatures. In January 2007, as everybody's aware, quagga mussels were detected in Lake Mead and subsequently thereafter in Lake Mead Hatchery. Because of these two issues, we're no longer producing fish or trout production at Lake Mead Hatchery. However, we are raising a small amount, about 50,000 fish, through a cooperative agreement with Willow Beach National Fish Hatchery. But this agreement comes to an end starting in March 2011. So as I said, some of the problems we have are warm water temperatures. As you guys know, the water levels in Lake Mead have been dropping steadily since 1998. And these water temperatures, or these declining water levels, have led to water temperatures increasing due to where our placement is on the intake valves, or when we get the water from. Primarily we use, right now currently, if we were running, we'd be using BMI intake, which is at about 1,060 feet. Last year in 2009, Lake Mead water level was only at 1,094, so there was only about 30 feet of water above the intake. Rule of thumb for Lake Mead, we need about 100 feet of water to where the intake, where it's drawn from. The only one that gives us some options, as you see, is the Sinwa intake number 2. That is just at the prime location for optimal trout production, but if the water levels decline, even that one's not sufficient. As you see, there's a third one being built. This is the intake 3, which is at 860 feet, and that one is expected to be completed in 2013. The second problem we have is quagga mussels. We can't run quaggas or use quagga-infested water through the facility due to the risk of the pipes and the pumps clogging, and in addition, we don't want to spread the quagga mussels to other uninfected waters within the state of Nevada. We do have some solutions. As I mentioned, Sinwa has a third intake that they are building that they are expected to be completed in 2013. Sinwa also chlorinates and dechlorinates their water, or ozonates and chlorinates their water, which would help rid of the quagga mussel problem. It's not 100%, but we can get down to a 98, 99% effectiveness. The issue is if you can see on your diagram there, the purple line or the blue line, depending on how it shows up, is the BMI pipeline that we're currently would be using. The Sinwa water treatment plant is right next to that, where you see that little red and green lines coming out from. And ideally, we had hoped that we could use, there would be a business transaction between Sinwa and BMI, and that we would just be able to build a smaller pipeline, connect to the existing BMI pipeline, and wouldn't have to do the third option, which is the green line of building a brand new pipeline. Fortunately, at this time, we don't have, there hasn't been a business transaction between Sinwa and BMI.
Will you tell us what Sinwa stands for, please?
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
for the record, thank you.
So our options that we sort of have is left available is we would need to build a new pipeline from the Sinwa treatment plant to Lake Mead Hatchery. Sinwa, when we discussed with them a while back, indicated that we would be assessed a connection fee of $2.5 million, which they would prorate over time. And in addition, there would be the construction cost for the pipeline, which is about $2 million. In addition to those fees and costs, we have additional ones to deal with other infrastructure changes, like filtration units to make sure that the water coming in is 100% quagga-free, dechlorination systems to get rid of any excess chlorine, etc., and to modify the pipelines to do some recirc reuse in order to help us with some water usage costs. So the total cost is estimated to be around $7.5 to $8.5 million to get this going, to get the hatchery going again. We're still trying to locate funding sources, but at this time we haven't been that successful in doing so. What this means in terms of fish production is when we originally started the refurbishment project, all the regions across the state reduced their trout stocking requirements. Before refurbishment, we were stocking about 460,000 pounds of fish. During the refurbishment, we're now at 317, but because we haven't been able to get Lake Mead back online, we are now only at the 322 mark. In addition to the trout stocking that was region-wide, Mason Valley Hatchery, which is located in Yerington, took on nearly 30% more production than what their facility is designed to do. Pre-refurbishment, they were doing about 156,000 pounds, and now they're doing about 202. As you can see from the graph there as well, Lake Mead went from 187 down to 29,000 pounds, and that's through the contract cooperative agreement with Willow Beach. Gallagher Hatchery also had a refurbishment done. We are now in 2010 and getting back to the pre-refurbishment levels. And Spring Creek Rearing Station, we did some modifications there to some raceways, and we have been able to increase production there as well. Because of the increased production at Mason Valley, we're starting to see some infrastructure failures. Just within the last 9 months, we have had to replace cooling tower media, and we've had one well collapse, and that we are doing emergency replacements on them. We know that the other 4 remaining wells at Mason Valley are also in the same condition and could fail at any time as well. So we have come up with a decision that we can't continue at this rate of production at Lake Mead or at Mason Valley Hatchery. So to relieve the production demands and the infrastructure problems at Mason Valley, and because we're losing Willow Beach National Fish Hatchery Cooperative Agreement, and that we haven't been able to find any funding, we are forced to take another stocking decrease. What we're planning to do is that in fall 2011, we will no longer be stocking Lake Mead or Lake Mojave. We will continue to stock the urban ponds in the southern region and the other smaller waters that we do, using fish from Mason Valley Hatchery and also from Spring Creek Rearing Station. As another update, as other ongoings, we have this hatchery. We are participating or allowing people to use space within the hatchery to do projects on quagga mussels. Both the BOR, which is Bureau of Reclamation, and Portland State University have experiments going on at the hatchery. which use up a little bit of space. And in addition, when we did the the refurbishment project, we constructed a T&E room, a threatened and endangered species room. And currently, we are also doing some razorback sucker culture. So just to summarize, basically because of infrastructure demands on Mason Valley, no longer having Willow Beach available to raise any trout, and no funding sources to get Lake Mead back online, we will no longer be stocking Lake Mead and Lake Mojave. Thank you.
Thanks. So basically, my understanding is Lake Mead Hatchery is mothballing it more or less.
Mark Warren, in doubt. There's two people there, the hatchery manager and the assistant. The two people are needed because we're still rearing trout down at Willow Beach, which is about 30 miles downriver, and somebody has to go there. These fish are being raised out in the Colorado River in net pens that are floating out there, and so that gives us some fish. So somebody, we can't expect that hatchery to do it. They're a federal hatchery, and these are state fish. So somebody from Lake Mead goes down there and cleans the nets and feeds them. One of the hatchery manager has had a knee operation, and he's going to retire. So Clyde Park is going to call it quits on December 31st. We'll be left with one person there at the hatchery. There's a certain amount of maintenance. There's 5 residences there that have to be maintained, as well as the hatchery. Somebody has to be there, and they're using part of the hatchery for some other work with the quaggas and the razorbacks, so make sure that the water's coming in and whatnot. So we'll be down to one person.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Howell, and then we'll have Mr. Vogler, and then we'll keep going.
Mark, the hatchery there at Lake Mead, they obviously, when they were in production, they supplied the various ponds around Clark County with fish.
They did?
And mostly they fed the stripers, though. Is that right?
Well, that's, you know, we know that's going on. It's been going on for years. We would get calls from striper fishermen and ask us, you know, where we stocked, so they could be out there and get some striper. And there is predation on the trout, and we admit that. And it's a question that Rich toyed with, and I've toyed with, and Carolyn's toyed with ever since. You know, when do we call it quits? When the lake was higher, a lot of the water moved into kind of shallower bays, and we really tried to push our trout stocking program. We would advertise it on the radio, newspaper, get people out there, and you know, harvest as many of those fish as we could as quickly within the letter of the law before they went out in the lake and were eaten. And there's a certain group of people that did like trout. One of the last reports I've seen is about 9% of the harvest at Lake Mead is, you know, still rainbow. So there is that. But there's also the other side of the coin, and we admit it. We calculated out that about 25% of the trout were harvested, and the other 75, you know, probably got eaten. So we recognize that, but there was still that demand, you know, for trout fishing, and we tried to meet that. I'm sorry? Yeah, the Colorado River and down in Lake Mojave too.
All right. Any other questions? We had Mr. Macbeth and then Mr. Vogel.
Any thought to where the money's going to come from to do this project?
Yeah, I called Obama and asked him if he had any extra, but hasn't returned my email yet. We don't know. We're hoping for a couple of things. Carolyn touched on it. The 2 water districts, BMI and SNWA, we're hoping that maybe there's, you know, one buys the other one, and so we won't have to build a new pipeline up to the hatchery of about 2 miles. We'll just have to do a little connecting there, and so that would save us $2 million. We're just kind of, you know, waiting to see. Sometimes money drops in from, you know, out of the sky. If, you know, different legislators hear about our plight and can kind of help with that. So it's kind of a wait and see thing.
Is there any possibility on and I'm not as familiar with the Dingle-Johnson monies, but is there any special grants or anything along those lines that might?
Well, we're pretty well use all our appropriations that we have now to run run the hatchery. Our hatchery program is about $2 million, and our field program for the field biologist fisheries is about $2 million, so it's pretty well used up.
For the record, Patrick Cates, we did go before the Public Works Board, I guess that was last month or earlier this month, and requested authorization for a CIP project related to this. What we requested was to use our own trout stamp money for planning. My hope, and it may be a long shot, but my hope is if they approve that, that'll give us time to plan. Maybe some things will work out with Southern Nevada Water Authority, and maybe, just maybe, the state might be willing to pony up out of general obligation bond funds. That's certainly not going to happen this session, but maybe by the time we get there, that might be a possibility. That's certainly my hope.
Isn't Lake Mead a federal, that's a recreation area, right? Federal recreation area.
Yes, it's a National Park Service.
Yeah.
It's federal.
So any chance that we can get, get the
money out of them?
Yeah.
Not that I know of. They have a limited budget also, but we look for any port in the storm. Anybody that wants to give us a couple million, we'll take it.
All right, Mr. Vogler.
According to Mr. Kahn at the Colorado River Authority, consumption of water is 20% off in the Las Vegas area. Is that alleviating any of your problems?
I didn't quite understand. I'm sorry.
The problem actually is the quagga mussels. It's not, the water level to some extent is the warm water, but the other part of the problem is also the quaggas. And with using BMI water, because they don't do any treatment, we can't use it because there would be quaggas in the facility.
Because 20% drop in water use in the Vegas area is over 100,000 acre-feet of water. I mean, that should help raise something. And do you have a water right?
Oh, we do.
Lake Mead would have a priority over Lake Powell, and for some reason, Lake Powell seems to be continuing to go up. You can't call
Yeah,
for
I'm
water.
not sure exactly how that works, but I know there's, we've talked about this in-house, that there's some kind of a breaking point on the agreement with Powell, and when it gets to a certain level, then they have to release water down to Lake Mead, and Lake Powell has been filling. And I'm not sure, a lot of people down here complain about that and say, hey, send us some water. But so far it hasn't happened.
All right, any questions? We'll move on. Let's see, looks like we had